So today we have Eugenio Torre versus Anatoly Karpov in what appeared to be some sort of a match. This is 1977 of Soviet Union versus Germany. It says International 04. I guess that's the fourth round. Bad Lauterberg. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what this was. It appears to be some sort of a match. And as we can see, the game started with e4. So let's jump right into it. This game actually is not too long, and I'm actually pretty excited to go over this game because we will see in a moment. So Torre opens with e4. Karpov responds with c5. Knight f3. I think a lot of people don't know that Karpov was a Sicilian player for quite some time before he switched over to e5 and did all those contributions in the Spanish opening that we all know very well today. So e6, d4, pawn takes on d4, knight takes on d4, a6. How exciting is this? This is the Sicilian con. This is the system that I play. I was really happy to see this. Of course, this is 1977. Theory at this time probably is not too relevant anymore today, but still it's pretty cool to see a game of your favorite player playing one of your openings. So c4. This system nowadays is known to be very good for white, and it is kind of a challenge for black to equalize. I think we actually saw a few games of this in the Carlsen Anand match as well. Yeah, where Carlsen got some pretty good positions with c4. So Karpov goes with queen c7. I think the main line today is knight c7. Knight c7. What do I say? Knight f6. Knight f6 and then queen c7, and then try to go for bishop b4. And yeah, white goes with a3, trying to avoid... Oh, I can't remember how the arrows were. Was it alternate? Yes, that's exactly how it was. Okay. What if I want to... Okay. Alright, I'm just seeing how the arrows were. So stopping bishop b4, right? This move gets... It can be annoying because the knight wants to come to c3, and black intends to pressure e4 by means of knight f6, and then maybe b6, and maybe bishop b7, and we're all going to try to gang up on this guy. And sometimes there's even some ideas where you go d6, knight d7, and knight c5, so that's the plan. Typical Moroxy versus hedgehog stuff. So a3 is a very useful move. It's actually, I think, one of the main lines in the system now. Not in this precise order, but it probably comes out to be the same thing. So yeah, we see the plan here. Karpov goes with knight f6, of course, developing a piece and attacking quickly on e4. And knight c3, defending the pawn, right? All this is very normal stuff. So knight c6, bringing another piece out, bishop e3, reinforcing the knight here on d4. And of course, clearing the square here for an important developing move. This is going to be pretty bothersome, right? With the eyeing the queen here, x-rays. There's actually some instances where it's possible with the rook on c1 to go like knight d5, where if you take, you take, and the knight's pinned. But that's way down the road. But yeah, white aiming for quick development, trying to make black's life impossible. So bishop e7. Of course, you want a castle. I wonder if I do. Does this work? Yeah, that works too. Okay. Black wants to castle as quickly as possible. Rook c1. There we have it. So knight e5 quickly putting pressure on the c4 pawn, and also maybe eyeing this g4 square over here, right? There might be some instances where maybe either knight could, not like that, but they could jump here to g4 and kind of put some pressure on the very important dark squared bishop over here. So we have bishop e2 controlling the g4 square. Of course, you don't want to take here because you're running into some nasty things here on the file. If you do this, well, you're just going to run into all sorts of trouble because knight could just move and you're practically almost losing a piece. So naturally Karpov does knight take, and he brings the knight to g6. Interesting maneuver. I don't think we see stuff like this anymore, but the square on f4 over here might become maybe some sort of an issue down the line. It's an interesting approach here. So Torre castles, b6, the bishop is going to come to b7 eventually. f4, taking some very important space here in the center, and maybe somewhere down the road threatening e5, right? And taking even more space, dislodging this knight here from f6, kind of cramping black's position a little bit. A normal response here would be to go d6. Karpov really doesn't believe in that d6 is necessary right now, or that e5 is a problem, and he goes with castles. Probably the idea is that after e5 he's just going to go knight e8, and then he's going to strike the center with d6, and it's going to be, as opposed to having this position here with these two pawns on e4 and f4, once this guy advances here and we strike with d6, we might be, we can... Saludos. ¿Cómo estamos? We might be weakening or softening up white's center a little bit. So yeah, Karpov is not too worried about that e5 push. I gotta say, whenever I see f4, I automatically go d6. I do not want to be squeezed in the center at all. So here, our friend Torre goes with b4, expanding on the queen side, taking even more space. Typical Maroczy bind versus hedgehog structures. Where white has these two strongholds over here, and they're just trying to take up as much space in the center as possible and cramping down on black's position. And black, meanwhile, is looking for, well, they're going to play very solidly, but at the same time they're looking for the opportune moment to maybe strike with d5, b5, and in some instances even f5 can be one of these liberating moves. So, and this together with the pressure that they're going to exert over the center with moves like bishop b7, rook c8, stuff like this. A lot of times we even see plans where it's possible to make queen b8 and queen a8 and just form a battery here, and before you know it, you just have a mess of arrows all over the place. But yeah, that's kind of like what's going on now. So b4, claiming more space on the queen side. Karpov goes with bishop b7, and with an immediate threat to take on e4 and win this guy over here, right? So the game continues with bishop d3. Now I must say, this game wasn't a very long game. Torre got dispatched in 34 moves. We're already on move 14, so it's a pretty good showing from Karpov here. Bishop d3, and again we see these themes, right? So rook c8, bringing the rook to the half open file, exerting some more pressure over the center here. c4. Torre responds with knight b3, and a very interesting move. The knight on d4 really isn't doing much, and now this is kind of like a reminder. It's like, hey, you have your weak spots too. You have to be careful. not saying that's a threat right away, right? Because e4 is weak, but you always have to be very mindful of stuff of like knight a4 or queen e2, f2, stuff like that, right? So black definitely has a soft spot in his side of the board as well. So Karpov finally decides to go with d6. d6 is a useful move because in any case, if the defense of b6 becomes a problem, you always have this. You always have knight d7 defending this guy over here. You could kind of do some rerouting of the pieces, maybe like this, and bring the knight to f8. Although with the knight on g6, maybe not the knight to f8, but things like that. d6 is always a useful move, and also, of course, important squares here in the center that we are now taking control of. So d6, a very, very standard and normal move in these types of pawn structures. Torre goes with queen e2. Karpov goes with rook f8. We're seeing all these moves, right, that we talked about, all these plans and strategies and whatnot. And we had mentioned earlier that it was kind of maybe an interesting idea down the road to go with queen f2. Of course, you can't do it immediately because queen f2 would be well met with knight g4. And then you kind of have a problem because you really don't want to give up this bishop. This bishop is very important in these types of structures. So Torre logically goes with h3. So maybe he's not going to go queen f2 soon, although I think it's a very logical move. But in any case, it's always a good idea to take this jump away from the knight and not have to worry about that down the road. And here we have our first official note of the game by Grandmaster Mihail Marin. It says that this is one of Karpov's rare experiments with the Sicilian. White has an impressive space advantage all over the board, offering black the latent possibility of using the weaknesses left behind by the pawns. For the time being, everything is safely defended, but we will see that white can become vulnerable on either the dark or the light squares. Kind of like this, I guess what he's referring to is this overexpansion of the pawns, right? Like it's very impressive to see these pawns here, but at the same time, every time a pawn is advanced, it weakens a square. So so this could be an issue down the road. Based on this comment, it looks like it does become an issue down the road. And it is comforting to see that at least I know the plans and ideas and maneuvers in this structure, because Karpov goes with knight d7, clearing the diagonal for the bishop, right? So probably somewhere down the line we're going to see a move like bishop f6 and try to start activating our pieces and pointing them towards the center. At the same time, we are addressing the weak pawn here in b6, which actually white is going to immediately attack with queen f2. So no direct threat yet, right? Because our pawn is defended by two pieces. It's attacked by two pieces. Still no issues, but uncomfortable pressure here nonetheless. Here we see a very interesting maneuver by Karpov. And this is bishop a8. Now ideally, what black is going for is that they want to have... Black doesn't want this battery of pieces on the c-file because this is very uncomfortable. A lot of times in this variation and very similar structures, black likes to play the queen to b8. The problem here being is that if you go to queen b8 immediately, then you will no longer be defending this pawn and you're dropping a pawn. So Karpov goes bishop a8 with the idea that he wants to go queen b8 and not drop this pawn. Okay, and maybe since we are removing the queen from the c-file, we might be preparing c5 or d5 somewhere down the road, because the opening of the c-file wouldn't present any major threat on our queen anymore. Torre anticipating that maybe some stuff is starting to brew here on the c-file after bishop e8 goes rook c2, maybe planning to double the rooks here on the c-file somewhere down the line. And actually this is exactly how the game went. Queen b8, rook fc1, and bishop h4. Seems like just a simple attack on the queen. The thing is that the queen really likes that square on f2. So even though it's, I guess, quote unquote, a silly threat, because obviously Torre is going to see that they're threatening his queen, still ideally he would like to keep the queen there. So yeah, it's a little bit of an annoying move. So here, it's also a provocative move. It's also a provocative move since we've already established that white would like to keep his queen on f2. So Karpov is probably anticipating that the move g3 is coming, which is what was played. What happened here? Why did it not move? G3. Okay. I don't know why that square isn't coming up on my screen, but it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't matter. So G3, right? Ah, I know how to. There we go. G3. This is the move that was played in the game. And what happens now is that this guy kind of becomes a little bit of a beast because he's weakened the diagonal even further. And we've already mentioned that every pawn advance weakens the square. So in this case, G2 advancing to G3 weakens the whole light square complex over here because we're not really eyeing this square anymore. So this could potentially maybe be some sort of an issue down the road. There are other options here, however, as we've seen. So the first one being queen f3. It says queen f3 exposes the queen to f5. Here we start seeing the role of the bishop, right? Some strong stuff. E takes f5, of course, wouldn't be possible because the queen hangs, and we've already mentioned before that e5, depending on certain types of situation, can be the liberating move for black here if d5 and b5 aren't possible. And here, after black manages to play f5, maybe knight f6 might be coming, putting further pressure on e4. They start to get a very, very good position, and here white structure starts to loosen up a little bit, so we don't want to do that. Another option here is queen e2. Might think, what's wrong with queen e2? Looks very natural, and at the same time, maybe down the road, eyeing a6. Problem with queen e2 is that it runs into e5. And if f5, knight f4. And here we start to see the problem of the dark squares. So first of all, if takes, and we have a beautiful square. I have a friend who likes to refer to these as juicy squares, which I hate that term, but I guess in this case he's not wrong. Knight e5, and from here this knight is just a beast. We might be threatening to soften up the structure with f3, putting pressure on c4, putting pressure on d3. The knight on e5 is an absolute monster. If you don't take it, you have to deal with this guy then on f4. So this is a problem. It says that here black is probably already equalizing, if not maybe slightly better. But in any case, it's a lot easier for black to play, I think, than what it is for white. So we have that issue. Or if not, in this position, we have queen d2 as another option as well instead of g3. In which case, bishop g3 is a very interesting move. Planning to play e6, e5. We've already seen what happens if f5. So bishop g3 adds an additional support here to f4 to meet f5 with knight f4. Okay, and then here, for instance, if knight e2, then bishop f4, bishop h4. White does not have anything better than to return the knight to c3. We're gonna have to see there. I doubt that Karpov would go for repetition here. Bishop g3, knight e2, bishop h4, knight c3, bishop g3, knight e2. I don't think so, but in any case, black is totally fine. White really hasn't been able to do anything with his supposed first move advantage, I guess. So g3 it is. And of course, we need to remove that bishop. Interesting interesting move here. Karpov goes with bishop d8. It seems like an awkward move. It seems like a strange move. It seems clumsy. I think that's the word. But there is some logic to it. First of all, it defends b6. And second of all, it leaves the option for white to play knight f6. So it says here, in view of the next move, this may seem like a loss of time, but I believe that Karpov intended to maintain some sort of dialogue between his bishop and the knight on b3. So if bishop f6, for instance, instead of bishop d8, if you go bishop f6, there could follow knight a4. And if b5, which is not a good move. Hey, hey, what's up? I've been streaming for like maybe 20 minutes. I'm not playing though. I'm not playing yet, so you really haven't missed much. I'm going over classic game study, which I haven't done in a while. We're seeing Torre versus Karpov, 1977. So I guess you're not late. But yeah, it has been going on for about 20 minutes or so. At about 20 moves too, but how's it been, man? Restore, hydrate. Listen, I've been I got my booster shot today, so I've been hydrating a lot. But yes, thank you very much. So b5 is not great due to this very interesting looking move, bishop a7, queen b7, and you have problems. You have serious problems with your queen. If you go queen c7, probably going to take on b5, winning a tempo here on c7, and you got issues. So the better move here would have been, instead of b5, is I'm going to try to get to 2350. Cool, where are you at now? Man, I've been trying for 2400 for forever, and I haven't reached it. And what about the team? I joined yesterday, actually. I thought you had seen it. Yeah, but I already joined the team yesterday. Yeah. Actually, I just got home like when I started streaming, but I was able to look at it, and not extensively though, but I did check it out, and I joined yesterday, so it seems like a lot of fun. So bishop d8 is the safer move here, right? So if you're eventually going to end up playing bishop d8 anyway, Karpov kind of anticipates all of this stuff, and he goes bishop d8, and only after white goes with knight d2 that there's no knight a5 stuff available in the other line that we saw, then he decides to bring the bishop back to f6. This is very deep stuff going on here. So it says, after the knight retreat, the bishop is not needed on d8 anymore. So therefore it makes a lot of sense to bring the bishop back to the action, pointing towards the center of the board and eyeing that ever important e5 square here in the center. Torre here goes for an interesting, at least that's what our friend Marin marks it down as, an interesting move with h4. We'll see later knight a4 is a possibility. But he goes h4. The problem is, this is interesting, but it's further weakening the squares around on the king's side. So what was the main alternative? Knight a4. To which most likely Karpov was planning on meeting that with b5. And here there's look like there's play for both sides. Like for instance, where did my knight b6, right? We'll take a look at c takes b5 later, but knight b6, knight takes b6, bishop takes b6, bishop c6, interesting, h4, and knight f8, followed by knight d7, and the game, and there's still a lot of tension in the game, followed by knight d7. Black can't not take on c4 quite yet, as this is kind of be softening up his queen side here a little bit, especially a6. So the other alternative was, where was it? Knight b6, b5. We saw knight b6, right? The other alternative is, of course, c takes b5, which in that case, rook c2 would probably be the continuation. Rook takes, 8 takes b5, knight goes back to c3, and here a good move by Karpov. I don't know if it's a good move or if it's a necessary only move. It's marked here as a good move, but bishop takes c3. The pressure on b5 was starting to become annoying. Rook takes c3 and then e5. We've seen this move already a couple of times in some of the variations, side variations here. f5 and knight e7, and this at least black has a solid position here, and they still have some sort of pressure on the pawn here on e4. And of course, you talked about the free moves already. This might be coming somewhere down the road, with good play for black, good play for white as well. I think I can't say that white's worse here, but in any case, there's still a lot of dynamic play left in this position. However, Torre was like, "I'll have none of that. You're studying, right? Yeah, I guess so. I like to review classic games. So we've been doing Karpov. Is it kind of like a two birds with one stone sort of thing? I get to see the classic games and stream at the same time. But then after this game, I'm gonna head over to the arenas and see how it goes today. But yeah, I find these classic games to be extremely useful. So h6, good move by Karpov. Not only stopping the pawn from further advancing after h5, but also clearing the h7 square for the knight, which we will see later on is going to be a thing. So h5, of course, knight comes back to f8, and g4. I must admit, if it was me, I'd be scared in this position. I'd be very scared. So black is extremely solid, but white has very nasty intentions, and g5 is coming quick. So it says an aggressive but apparently committal move as after e6, e5. This e6, e5. Black is likely to get control over the g5 square. I don't know if likely convinces me too much in this type of position, but apparently it's enough. So, for instance, if not g4, then what? Bishop b2 is one option. Apparently it's not a great option. It allows bishop takes c3, rook takes c3, and knight f6, putting pressure on e4. Of course, bishop f3 defending the pawn, and e5 with good play for black. Again, far from over, right? There's still a lot going on, and it looks like white's structure is a little bit loose, I guess, but still they boast a lot of space, a good space advantage. So this is one option. Our other option is a bit more of an abstract move, knight db1, but preparing to meet bishop takes c3 with knight takes c3. All right. So for instance here, interesting move, we were talking about control of the g5 square earlier, and here knight h7 is an interesting move with the idea that we want to advance e6, e5, and yeah, kind of asking the pawn here on f4, what are you going to do? Are you going to take here, or are you going to advance? Are you going to allow me to take control of g5? Are you going to just stay there and allow me to take and soften up your king side? So black asking white some very serious questions, what they're intending to do with their pawn structure, specifically the square here on g5, right? Yeah, let's not forget that, of course, we always have, once this pawn is on e5, you really can't advance e4 anymore, so you're going to have to be kind of dealing with this constant pressure the whole time. Maybe the bishop could come back and knight could come to f6. It becomes annoying. It becomes annoying for white. So an interesting position. It looks like white really has to come crashing through with this attack, because if not, they're just going to be left with a bunch of weaknesses. So here we have g4, yeah, we saw it, and knight h7. We see this idea once more, and of course the same theme, right? We're preparing to play e6, e5, and if we could establish a blockade here on g5, then white's attack is going nowhere. You're just going to be left with an extremely weird pawn structure here, right? Because this pawn will be on f5, and black's just going to pressure on e4 and c4 forever, and with no way of crashing through, it's going to be a little bit challenging. Now, why not play, let's go back here a minute, what happened? e5 directly, right? Well, the problem is if we go e5 here, f5, and if you go knight h7, white has time to play knight f3 and contest control and contest the g5 square. For example, if you try to go knight g5 anyway, you say I'm stubborn and I'm just going to put a piece there anyway, so knight takes, bishop takes, h takes, queen e3, of course f6 is forced, right? You really can't drop that pawn. Bishop e2, bishop e2 kind of clearing, what a move, right? You might think, what the heck is bishop e2 for? Actually, we have a new plan now. We're going to bring these guys over to the d file and attack this guy here on d6, which now happens to be a weak backwards pawn. So queen c7, there you see it, rook d2, rook e d8, black starts piling on the d file as well. Did you see the big tournament? Which one did it happen already, or is it going to happen? No, I haven't seen it. I saw some tournament not too long ago where they didn't the winner get like 0.8 bitcoins or something like that. Is that the one that you're referring to? Mm-hmm. And king f2. King f2, the black knight does not have the f6 square, which allows white to invade the d5 square. So, yeah, white's going to come in with d5 eventually. And there's also some ideas of bringing the rook to the h file, and maybe even the queen, and trying to come crashing through the h file. So that's why it's important to have piece control of the g5 square. You don't really want to have your pawn chain damaged here. So Karpov goes knight. Vitesse is down for a couple of minutes. When was this? I didn't see any of this. Knight h7. Karpov, of course, his understanding of these positions is just incredible, and he's not rushing. He's not rushing at all. He knows he's always going to have e6, e5, so he's trying to play it at the moment where it's most convenient for him. And finally, it looks like Torre cracks, and he makes the final mistake of the game, maybe even the only mistake of the game, e5. Now, we're going to see a few options here, but e5 is a losing move. You've been doing chess for 15 years. I have. Yeah, probably even a little bit more. The thing is, I had stopped for about 6 years. Since 2015, yeah, I stopped playing in 2015 or doing anything chess related, and then with this whole pandemic thing, I picked it up again. But yeah, give or take, I started competing when I started competing in my early teens. A little bit over 15 years, actually. Where are we? E5, yeah. So Torre panics after realizing the positional danger cast by e6, e5. So he starts to see, whoa, shoot, e6, e5 might give me some problems that I don't want to deal with. It's making me decide between some decisions that I really don't like. So what happens if I play e6, e5 myself? Well, what happens is that's the losing mistake, and here, according to our grandmaster friend, black already has a decisive advantage. So what? We'll see why in a minute, but what could have white done? So we'll take a look at some of the options here. There's quite a few. Well, first of all, knight f3. What's the matter with knight f3? It looks logical, right? We saw earlier how important it was to fight for control of the g5 square, right? So knight f3 makes a lot of sense. And here, black has a very interesting response. Bishop takes c3, good move. And this is just a tactical thing that after rook takes c3, knight f6, and you have a problem here with these two guys, who one of them is going to be falling. I guess they could always try for like g5 and try to muddy the waters here a little bit, but stuff like that. But I don't think this is gonna be. Bye, I gotta go. All right, man. All right, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for stopping by and saying hello. I'm sure I'll catch you around later. This game is actually coming to an end, but and then we'll hit the arenas. But yeah, man. Posture check. Thank you. Yes. It's easy to start slouching. Appreciate that. All right, man. Take it easy. I'll see you around. And thanks again for stopping by. Straight up. All right. Knight h6. So that loses a pawn. All right, man. Peace. Knight f3. We have queen g2 is another option as well. The problem with that is that we have this guy. So this is very uncomfortable. For instance, this is a problem now. There's no pushing the pawn because I win a tempo with d takes c4, right? You can't do stuff like this because this is going to put an immediate attack on the queen. Then I could take the bishop. If you go here, not like that. If you go here, I'll take here, and I'm threatening the rook. Huge mess. Which of course does not favor white at all. What other options do we have here? I think that's pretty much it. So the other option would be to play queen g3, but now we have e5, and if g5, e takes f4. So I guess it's kind of hard to recommend a move here for white falling asleep. So you know, because of that, it's difficult, or maybe not fair, to say that e5 is, well, this is the losing move if you really can't recommend something where you're not losing. So I guess it's not. It looks like the position was already a little bit difficult to begin with. Yeah, but after e5, then the problem is Karpov just calmly continues with d takes e5. And this is Torre's idea. We're not going to immediately take on e5, but instead we're going to try to, what we talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to try to muddy the waters and complicate things as much as possible and try to weaken the position of the king. But e takes f4 is absolutely fine. So you threaten my bishop, right? I'll threaten yours. And whose king is weaker? This guy seems to be a lot weaker than this guy, especially considering that this bishop is a menace here, and the queen could very quickly join here on b7. So this is going wrong for Torre very, very quickly. Bishop takes f4, and here, what a move by Karpov, right? You can be greedy and take on g5, trying to be fancy, right? Because obviously the queen is being hit, but after bishop takes b8, you have knight h3 check, and we have a fork over here. So king f1, knight takes the queen, takes, and this is still winning for black, but Karpov is having none of it, and he goes, instead of knight takes g5, which is good, he goes with bishop e5. Just keep it very, very simple. We're threatening to win the bishop. If you take, pieces are going to start coming in. So he goes with g6, f takes, h takes, bishop takes. What a move, right? Takes. And all of a sudden, the only thing that white has achieved is that this guy is extremely safe, while this guy is not. So white's attack did not, was not even close to succeeding here. Rook f1, rook f8, bishop e4, knight e5, all the pieces just start coming in, and we see all the weaknesses here, weaknesses here, weaknesses here. There's troubles here on the f file. Torre tries to go with some stuff here, maybe, I don't know, pressure along the file, but Karpov goes and he takes another pawn. So if we see this position, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns versus 1, 2, 3, and eventually this one on h7 is going to drop. So we're threatening knight e3 with the fork over here. There's nothing. I mean, white is absolutely hopeless in this position. So much so that Torre said, this is enough. This is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm dead lost. And he resigned.